Salvis Search for the Universe. Chapter 9. Grand Counselor Manakel Maravu, to you I extend my most cordial greetings. With respect to the King's current situation, I will perforce skip the formalities. Tension along the Narlem border are rising, and I am afraid they will launch an all-out assault in the coming months, should their strength continue to gather. In the next letter you will find full details of our situation, as reported by our scouts. It is with true regret that I must admit that our preparations have been less than ideal. My coffers still run low after the crop failure 3 years prior, and I have been unable to provide the arms necessary for such a skirmish. I request that the tariffs on arms and armor be lifted from my realm for the duration of this conflict. My accountants assure me that this would be sufficient to acquire the equipment my forces require. With this boon, I am certain my forces will secure victory for King and our kingdom of Merith. May God's light shine favorably upon you. Lord Talley of House Denker. Manacle's eyes trailed off the end of the parchment. A sudden burst of anger rose in his chest. He fought off the urge to crumble it between his hands, and let out an exhausted sigh. He managed to restrain himself. He sat at his angled desk. An oil lamp burned bright, despite the sunlight already filling the room. He had seen too many people go blind, from squinting over documents in poor light all day. Scrolls filled the room, on his desk, in barrels, even carelessly strewn across the floor. Writs, deeds, requests, grants, reports, charters. The only kind of document he didn't have were religious canons, and even then he still had to read those. His assistant wrestled with some scrolls in the background, dumping them to the floor before sitting to sort them out. With respect to the King's current situation, he thought bitterly. It had been almost 3 years since the King's mind began to deteriorate, and with no heir, had no choice but to remain on the throne, in spite of it. Manakel had been forced to take charge of almost all of the kingdom's affairs. No one would dare joke that he might as well be the king, but certainly they all thought it. He looked at the letter again. There had been a time where he enjoyed these political games, even extracting some perverse glee as he maneuvered and destroyed his opponents, with nothing more than a pen and his intellect. But his swollen pride had deflated with his many years. He was old, though still not as old as the king. His hair had receded until the top of his head looked like a giant egg, sitting in the middle of a wispy, white bird's nest. What to do? It was obvious. "Peter?" He turned to his assistant. The boy's head perked up from his seat on the floor. Dutifully, Peter rose and walked beside Manacle's desk. He was not so much a boy as a fully fledged man, but his curly blonde hair and youthful, almost angelic face made it all too easy to forget he was 19. "Yes, Grand Counselor."
"What do you think of this?"
He showed him the letter. The boy read it over, eyes scrolling down line after line. When he was finished, he gave it some thought before replying. He's trying to use the border skirmish as a pretense to get more favorable trade. He probably stands to get back more than he will lose with the battle. His finances have still not recovered, and he is hoping to use this as a means to recuperate his losses. Manacle's old lips stretched into a smile, his spectacles beaming with a sort of sly pride.
Indeed, you are right, but you are not entirely correct. It is true he stands to gain from the removal of the tariffs, but it is probably much more than you realize. While his house is bordered with Nalem, it also borders Merkland, famous for its quality of its arms and armor. Lord Tally has been in conflict with the young upstart Lord Durbin for some time now, who has been building his realm upon the trade flowing from Merkland. Both border Merkland. Currently they favor Durbin, but should the tariffs vanish, which lord do you think they would favor? Which house do you think it would weaken? And which house do you think it would strengthen?
A flash of understanding shined in the boy's eyes. It was a look he liked to see, but Peter looked away in chagrin.
Why do you always ask for my opinion, Manakel? You are far more clever than I could ever hope to be. I cannot imagine my input being of any use to you.
That self-effacing attitude was something he would need to fix. He clapped him on the shoulder.
Don't put yourself down, my boy. You are clever. There is much potential inside of you. What you mistake as raw intelligence is simply 50 years of experience. If you were given as much time, I'd imagine you would even surpass me.
He smiled. Peter brightened.
Now,
his sly look returned.
How do you propose we should respond?
Peter looked surprised to be sprung with another question so quickly, but looked more confident as he considered. Deny lifting the tariffs, but the threat is real and cannot be ignored. Instead of lifting the tariffs, we should offer him money from the king's coffers to cover the costs instead. It is difficult, though, to use something necessary to sneak in something advantageous.
My boy, I am afraid you have discovered what politics is all about. Your suggestion is absolutely correct.
The boy beamed, but Malachor tapped his nose, grinning.
But first you should consider if it's possible to take advantage of their attempt to take advantage of us. Would we benefit from a stronger House Denker? Or is it in our interest to keep Lord Durbin on top?
He stood.
Think on it while I'm gone.
He gathered up several documents laid about his desk and hooked them under his arm.
Yes, Your Eminence.
Peter bowed.
Excellent.
He smiled at the boy and headed to the door. His face darkened with the boy at his neck. Now it was time for what he dreaded most. He left his humble office and stepped into the cavernous halls of Mandar Palace, the crown jewel of Panes and the pride of all of Murith. Floors sprawled with the finest marble, shining bright with the efforts of hundreds of servants housed inside its walls. The ceiling rose into dizzying heights, and the walls were lined with stretching columns. Anything left blank by the architecture was filled with priceless works of art, and every archway looked enough to be an artisan's life's work. Even after all these years he had spent inside its halls, it was still a sight to behold. But even the architecture of the great palace could not bring light to his dark heart. Servants could get lost in these halls for hours. Visitors could spend days admiring every detail, but he knew it all like the back of his eyelids. It did not take long through the long, winding lanes before he was upon it. The throne room. The guards opened the door for him, and he stepped inside. Tydale Mandar, the king of Murith, sat there, sagging in his seat, his eyes glazed and vacant as they stared at a distance. His flesh-ridged knuckles laid limp atop the side of his throne. He tilted his head at unhearable sounds. He tried to stand up, but the servants eased him down, placating him with a stream of wine. It dribbled down the corner of his mouth, staining his flaky white beard. The servant wiped it away. He hated it. He hated looking at the stranger in front of him. Some spirit, some terrible demon had stolen the real Tynedale and replaced it with this pitiful, pitiful creature. The foul hybrid between elf and troll, birthed through magic, changelings. It could be doppelgangers, spirits of fell, perhaps. Those brows, once bent with determination, now sagged listlessly over his half-lidded eyes. Those trembling hands, that once could swing a sword with such might, that none in the kingdom dared challenge him, now grasped at apparitions that swarmed his eyes alone. That was not Tynedale. Every time he stepped into the chamber, some part of him expected to see the old Tynedale sitting there, waiting for him, with eyes so bright and full of life even in his elder years. That domineering face and implacable will that had brought their kingdom into new ages of prosperity. Saviour of Callahan, slayer of the white snake, keeper of the crown of ages. That was who he was. That was Tynedale the Ironheart. Not this impostor. Deny it as he might, it was the truth. He clenched his fist. Man cannot help time taking away their body, but why did it need to be his mind? He approached the king. The guards stepped closer, for Manacle's own protection. It was only 6 months ago when Keller, one of the king's most trusted confidants as well as long-term friend, had visited the old man. No one knows what caused the king to suddenly fly into a murderous rage, bashing his friend Keller with his cane until he was nothing more than a lump of beaten flesh. Servants came rushing in, seeing the king standing over the corpse, his head swaying around the room as he asked, "Where is Keller?" repeating it over and over again as he searched all over the room. He had never been allowed alone after that.
Tyndale,
Manakel said.
I brought some things for you to sign.
His head did not stir.
The
king exhaled sharply and gave a childish smile, swishing his hand through the air as if writing on parchment. Manakel grabbed his fragile, bone-thin hands and forced a pen into them. He sat down the parchment on the side of the throne and led his hand to the line at the bottom. Tyndale scrawled over the page. Manakel frowned at it. He would need to redo it, as usual.
Manakel,
the king's weak voice suddenly called.
Is that you?
He started, looking up to see the king locking eyes with him. It was like waking up to a spectre, staring into your face. Deep in the chasm of his grey, glazed eyes glimmered something like awareness. He hated these days the most.
Yes, my liege, I'm here. Manakel.
The name swirled in his head.
Have you seen my son? I have not seen him for quite some time. My liege, your son is dead. He died 20 years ago in the Battle of Murraymore. Oh.
He stretched and pulled at his face, tears leaking from his sagging eyelids. Never once in his life did Manakel think he would live to see tears flowing from the king's face. It was like watching a god being struck down to mortality.
My liege, No, I remember. I remember now. He's dead. I am without an heir. My mind is going. I know my mind is going. Oh, to have fallen in the field, than to suffer this. To be buried by my wife.
He leaned back, eyes to the heavens.
Your Majesty, please, if you could sign these documents. What?
He looked.
What are they for?
Manakel looked regretful.
This is from Duke Alak. He's requesting...
He went on, explaining it all, watching the old king's face screw and squint as he desperately tried to understand it all. It broke his heart.
Denied. Deny it.
The king waved his hand.
I have already made arrangements for just that. Sign it and it is as good as done.
Manakel wished he could be happy, but these episodes were always short-lived. The king's face tightened with regret and embarrassment. He was unneeded, and he knew why, at least for now. The king finished signing. It was bittersweet, But Manacle did not need to redo the signatures this time.
I have failed. I have failed my kingdom. I could not give them an heir. Oh. But after Anders' death, I could not bring myself. And at my age...
He stared into the distance, full of regret.
This throne is so cold. Tynedale.
Manacle grasped the king's hand. To call the king so casually, it was an inexcusable breach of decorum.
I swear, I will find your heir. Just wait. Just wait a little while longer.
The king looked at him with weary eyes that had once been so wise, and allowed some peace into his troubled expression, then looked up.
Rondo! Lord Rondo, praise!
Manacle did not notice him come in.
Correct, your majesty.
Rondo smiled, and so did the king. His memory had not failed him this time.
But I'm a duke now. Duke Rondo. Ah, yes, I remember now. I raised you to dukedom 7 years ago.
Rondo smiled assuringly. Manacle looked away. It was actually 11.
How are you feeling, your majesty?
Rondo asked.
I'm tired. So tired.
His eyes glazed over. His head swayed and bobbed, murmuring quietly, but came back.
So tired. Please forgive me, your majesty, but it pains me to see you like this. Propped up on your throne to be some kind of puppet.
He struck Manacle with an evil eye.
There are noble houses with royal blood. If you would please consider relinquishing your throne, we can... Manacle! Manacle!
He shook his head, swayed limp like a stuffed doll, then stopped, gazing off.
I want to see my gardens. It's always beautiful in autumn. Bring me to my gardens.
He tried to rise. Servants helped him up and walked him down the chamber. Rondo rounded on Manacle.
How long do you intend to carry on this disgrace? Parading around our king as you play kingmaker? You are not of noble blood. What right do you have to rule our kingdom? My duties are no different.
He stared fire into Rondo's eyes.
They are the same as they ever were. You know how the king trusts my discretion. Never has he ever rejected my counsel. When he had a mind to keep you in check, you make laws and pass judgment in the name of the king with total impunity. You waylay every attempt to succeed the throne. House Denker, House Welper, House Kinehorn. All have royal blood and are fit to take the throne. Royal blood 4 generations removed. Can you not see the chaos that would cause? All have equal claim. If we're to announce a race for the throne amongst the houses, it would ignite a civil war. The head of House Welper has already assassinated in anticipation of such a thing. I am the only one keeping this kingdom from erupting into bloodshed and tearing itself apart. We cannot choose carelessly. Choose carelessly? It has been 3 years, and still you delay. Do you intend to wait until the king is dead, and cannot give his blessing? You warn of bloodshed, yet lead us inexorably towards a situation far worse.
Their chests heaved. The line of fire burning between their eyes seemed to spark and flare. It was Rondo who broke it off, turning shoulders, cape bellowing.
Manacle, play monarch all you want, but do not think you will survive the next to take the throne.
He walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing loud. Manacle let his balled fists relax. He would not be bullied by the houses. He had stood up to them countless times before. Even so, he could not deny the truth of his words. If Rondo held a claim to the throne, he could dismiss his opinions as mere politicking. But what he was doing was right. It was right. Oh, how he hoped what he was doing was right. He was on the verge of disaster, and his schemes might just take the whole kingdom with them. He re-entered his office. Peter brightened, starting to speak, but held his tongue at the sight of Manacle's dour expression. Manacle fell into his chair. He rubbed around his eye sockets, looking at the heap of parchments still littering his desk. He felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. It wasn't only Rondo's words that ate at him. It was the anxiety that would not be quelled until he received that letter from Luhorn.
Manacle, sir?
Peter asked meekly. He turned, fixing him with one eye.
What is it, Peter? I've been thinking like you told me, and I think it's best we keep House Danker weak. They have a claim to the throne, but if they lack resources, they will be forced to give up their claim. That would leave the dispute of who gets to become king two-sided, instead of three. That is probably why he thought up this scheme to begin with.
Manacle grinned ear to ear, all his anxiety and worries briefly banished.
My boy, that is exactly right.
Peter beamed.
Now, run to the kitchens and fetch me a pitcher of wine, and bring a cup for yourself as well.
He winked. Peter looked shocked, but was overjoyed. He bowed and jogged out of the room with a skip in his step. The door latched behind him. Manacle sagged into his seat. He slipped open a drawer, removing the false bottom, sliding the latch and revealing a keyhole. He took the key hidden in his clothes and slipped it inside. The mechanism clicked, revealing the secret compartment. Inside gleamed a pendant, made as if to appear broken. He checked on it every time he left his office. To see it still there brought a small relief, but he could not truly relax until its twin was in his possession. He prayed the letter from Mr. Hobb would arrive soon. He should have passed through Luhorn by now, but, given travel time, may be as far as Gribbach. Likely he was being pursued, but he did not know by whom. Someone out there knew what he was up to, or at least a gist of his scheme. Uncovering the schemer would take time, something he unfortunately did not have, as he single-handedly struggled to prop up the entire administrative affairs of a large kingdom in a time of crises.
Gods, whatever might be listening, please let him arrive safely.
He whispered to the heavens, and locked the compartment once again.